Well, welcome everybody. My name is Tiffany. I am the owner of Tiffany Gordon Cosplay LLC, which is a costume and prop making company, as well as it focuses on education part. Welcome to my panel, which is actually more of a demonstration. We are going to attempt to do this in under 45 minutes, hopefully a lot less so we can have questions at the end. And this is how to make a breastplate pattern using the basic saran wrap and masking tape method, which is really cheap, really affordable, and a lot easier to do. This is our lovely model today. Brittany, do I have your consent to wrap you up in masking tape?
I mean, yes, you had it about Thursday, so.
Okay, well, please step forward. So, for doing this, what you will need is obviously saran wrap or cling wrap. One of my favorite things is packing wrap. So if you're going to any type of like moving or whatever, these things are great because this whole thing rotates and it makes it a little easier at times, especially if you're trying to do this to yourself. I highly recommend for this method having a second person to help you because it's a lot easier, especially when you have to cut yourself out. So other things that you will need is your masking tape or duct tape. Other things that you'll need are some scissors. Don't use an X-Acto knife to cut yourself out, please. Very careful with your scissors. And sharpies. I always recommend 2 colors, and we'll get to that at the end why. So let us and start wrapping. Now with this method, you don't need to do tons and tons of wraps around. You only need it to cover once. Sorry. Thank you. Also with this, do not your tummy suck in. You want this to be pushed out as far as possible because the saran wrap in general, when you do this, most likely you're not going to be wearing a shirt on. You'll probably just be wearing a bra, or if you're a male, not wearing anything. Or maybe you will. Just depends on what you want. All good?
What might be underneath what you're actually going to wear.
Yep. And then just start wrapping around. Now, if you're a female, you most likely, for your breastplate, want 2 breasts and not 1 uniboob. And so with this method, I like to cross over and do a V section. So going over 1 breast first and then wrap around. And I'm actually gonna rip it here. And then we're gonna do the opposite way. And the cling wrap or saran wrap should stick to itself most of the time. Sometimes it'll peel off. And we're going to wrap across the other section. Doing this will give you the best results for getting that nice V, so you have 2 separate shapes rather than pulling the 2 breasts together, creating 1. And then you're just gonna continue wrapping yourself. You don't have to do too many layers. It's not going around multiple times. And for me, I also, when I do this, I'm gonna be focusing on one side mostly, because typically your breastplate patterns are gonna be near to your opposite side, so you really only need to do one side. And I recommend after you make this pattern, to save it, to copy it onto, if you can, take pictures and put it on your computer so you can save it, you can print it out, whatever you want. One below.
Feel like a package.
A beautiful package. We will put a bow on you at the end, and then we will ship you off to your husband.
I mean, that'd be funny.
Okay. We're gonna do a little bit more on this side, and this is gonna be our quick and fast method, so we can do this for our demo. There we go. So that's pretty much what we're gonna do for now. Next, masking tape. And for this, you don't want to wrap in circles around the body. The reason if you do that, it's going to constrict you and make it tighter. And that makes your patterns mess up. You want them to be form-fitting enough and not squinched in. So if you're by yourself, it's really easy to do the front. If you're not, or like if you're by yourself, you have a hard time with the back. So just be aware.
But that's what friends are for, right?
Oh, yeah. So I kind of naturally follow the curvature of either the mannequin, the person that I'm wrapping up, myself, and not try to pull the tape where I want it as much, because this is going to wrinkle your tape a lot. So we're just going to kind of knock it over, not pulling as we go. Whatever it is.
Peter Pan.
Yes.
I was worried I was gonna end up smacking her on accident.
There.
Like, my arms are going everywhere, so.
Hey, at least I'm not using you as a coat hanger today.
Hey, it worked really well yesterday.
Yesterday I was wearing my Mezzanine costume and a large staff, and when I need to go to the restroom, I have a
hold
lovely
it.
assistant that helps. And I gave her my hat to wear, and Mezzanine also has a cape, and I put the cape over her hat and the gloves on top of the hat, and it worked out well.
Okay, that's what I'm there for.
Yep. So once I get kind of the first part covered on there, I will do a strip to wrap around so the tape will attach to itself. And this is just to ensure that it will not shift if you are moving, that it won't open up and it won't adjust. So this is like the safety belt of keeping it all together. And we'll do that towards the top as well. But I'm gonna focus probably on this side of the body. And with the breast area too, we don't want to do across because that is going to pull it together. We want to do two separate pieces. So we're going to put in the center and nicely cover this way. In the end, the breast area should look like a teardrop when covering it with masking tape, and that's gonna give you the best shape for that. And then also push down your tape as much as possible. And then can you turn this way?
A lot of people see it.
Yeah. So on the back, because I tend to do the breast area more towards the last part, but following that, I'm going to continue going in one direction. Again, we're only focusing now on this side because we want it to be connected from the front and the back. So that way when you take it off, all of your lines will match. And slowly keep covering. I will say when doing this process, the person that is being wrapped in saran wrap and masking tape, it does get extremely hot. So I recommend putting on fans, having the AC lower than what you would naturally want. You would most likely want to be cold before coming into being wrapped. So that way you can slowly become warm. That makes sense. Yep, okay. Let's turn you. Other way, other way. Arm up. Okay, that works. You're doing a fantastic job.
I'm a great man of light.
Yes. Go on, poke away. And for this, I'm doing a breastplate and not a sleeve connection, so I'm not going to fully go over the armpits and everything. Also, for the sake of time here, it would take too long. So she would be able to sit down, but the problem with sitting down, it may adjust or pull because when you sit, your curves change. You tend to have a little bit more of a tummy. So I would try not to, but you can start off sitting if you have a stool, have them sit on a stool and do the upper half, and then have them stand and do the lower half, the midsection, as a separate piece. And that would probably work. If you are trying to do a full suit, do it in sections. Don't do it all at once. Draw a line where it's gonna be for that one piece, and then do that same line on your next piece, and don't do them all as one. You can, but it's a lot. And I recommend a buddy for that. So, all right. I'm trying to do as much as possible so everybody can see. And typically I would cover saran wrap up to here, but I don't want to wrap her hair and yeah. So that's pretty good for our back right here, because again, we're going to mirror the pattern. So can you rotate this way? And we're gonna finish off with our breast area. So for the undercut, typically you want to go around, especially if you are more voluptuous. I can't say
Voluptuous.
Thank you, that word. And we are going to go under and slowly start to make our teardrop shape. Also, if you would like to have slightly enhanced boobies, you can always wear larger bras. You can stuff them, whatever size that you want. I recommend having that on beforehand because it's a lot easier to make your pattern to the size that you need and not trying to adjust the cup size after. Okay? Yeah? Okay. And you can do this also for fabric patterns, not just breast patterns, and it works just the same. You'll just need to add seam allowance when you make all of your lines. Typically for seam allowance for fabric, you want to do 1 centimeter to all of your seams, if not a little bit larger. So this is going to be, for the most part, what our pattern base is going to be. Just doing it in half. I'm actually going to go a little bit higher. Sometimes you want lower ones, you never know. Depends on the design. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to start with our Sharpies. So this is where I said 2 different colors of Sharpies. Typically, I'll use the red for basically my guidelines. And for this, I like to do it, if you look at fabric, where your normal seam is gonna be on a shirt. You're gonna have a seam straight down the side of each. And then I like to do a front line, as well as on the back, a straight line down the back. This is gonna make it so you are easily able to tell where all of those quadrants are around you. I also like to do a seam around where I want the arm to come through, a seam for the neck, and then you're gonna have a seam also with fabric. Typically you have one right here. And those are gonna be, for the most part, where we're gonna cut it afterwards as well. And then the last one that I'll typically do is a guideline where the undercup is. So that way you kind of know. Also, if you want to know where your waist is, you can always do a line where your waist is gonna be or where your belly button is. So that way, if you don't want to draw the pattern on yourself and you want to draw it once you take it off of yourself, you know where all of those lines are. And it tends to work the best. So we're going to start drawing on you. So we'll do that one first. We'll do our seam up here. I promise not to get Sharpie on your white shirt as long as you don't move. Yeah.
I'm trying to be statue.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna have you like that. So we're gonna do our line here. Leave your arm up for a little. Oh, I was gonna say just that way you don't get the Sharpie on it. Turn.
I don't think I've ever actually worn a shirt, so
I don't want to ruin it though. And then our seam down the back center. And then I'm going to just do basic guidelines. Again, typically we would wrap closer to the neck. So I would put the line up there, but I'm going to just lower it. We're going to kind of do our lines like this breastplate as guidance. So maybe that'll be helpful. Also, I see your phone is blowing up again.
oh yeah. Is this SoonerCon? Every time.
Turn this way. We're going to pretend that our masking tape is choking her all the way to the top. And we're going to do our line connecting here. And then we're going to do our arm for where our armhole is going to be. I'm just gonna do a center, so your belly button here. Okay, we're gonna go there, and then we're just gonna go all the way around as well. And I didn't put the tape down low enough, so just gotta be a little higher. So yeah, so that's pretty much what my guidelines are gonna be. So afterwards, I'm gonna switch to a different color Sharpie. You can use the same color, but it's gonna get a little bit difficult, especially if you're going to be drawing on a very intricate pattern, all of the swirls and stuff. You might get a little confused. So I always say do 2 different colors. Oh, I didn't do my breastplate. I'm sorry. Womp womp. Womp womp. I take that back. We're gonna do our undercut real quick. That way I kind of know where it is. All right. So now for drawing on the pattern, if you're doing a breastplate specifically out of EVA foam, typically the waist section, you have a hard time bending. So a lot of breastplates, I won't actually bring it to my waist. I bring it slightly upward, so that way I don't have to deal with bending as much. If you do have it go to your waist, you will get a crease in your EVA foam. Same if you're doing this as a breastplate for Warbler, because Warbler is very non-bending because it's a thermoplastic. It's very just not able to do anything. Yeah. So for a pattern, let's do
Start doodling.
Start doodling down.
Or if you have an actual picture.
Yeah, reference images. Typically, if my reference image is straight on, it's really easy to draw your pattern. If your reference image is slightly curved, I recommend doing the side that you can see most on. Watch, or like looking at it, so that way you know you're not having to mirror it in your head. Oh, that's fine. You can always do this and take it off, and I'll show you at the end how we'll kind of cut it up. And you can take pictures and put it on the computer and then draw on there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Good question though. Okay, so now that we have that, we're gonna do a little bit more of our detail. We're gonna make this a little smaller. Arm up, please. And turn. Turn. Put the arm down. Now it's up again. There you go. No, I did. Just start drawing some more. For this one, we're gonna have it, let's do a V. And then we'll pretend that this is like a corset lace up in the back, because why not? Okay, so we've got that. So, I'm trying to think what to draw on this. It's hard to just come up with a breastplate idea and not like have a reference image. Okay, so let's do, I messed up. I don't know what to do. Okay, so the best thing for your Sharpie is get your masking tape for any mess up. It's gone! Yeah, that's the easiest method. You can still see a little bit through it, but you can cover it as much as you want with masking tape. Typically, if I'm doing, like, I'm trying to do a straight line and I'm really shaky that day, sometimes I'll go back and do the tape over it like 3 times just to get my correct line. I will say it's also a lot easier to draw on it when you take it off your body, but you can do it either way. Okay, back to drawing.
Draw some hearts.
Hearts. Okay, we're gonna do a heart cutout here. Yeah, just tell me what you want me to draw. So we're gonna do our lovely heart cutout. So I'm only doing half of the heart because ideally we would want to mirror it to the opposite side. And then we're going to want to do our underbreast again. And I'm not gonna do a heart on a certain spot because that would be awkward.
Interesting.
Yeah, wrong panel. And then let's say we want this one to be more of a point here, and it's gonna go a little higher. rotate, please. Lots of circles.
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Also, do you need any water? Because I don't have any water for you.
No, I
Okay.
okay. I'm supposed to give you water.
Okay. And that's pretty much for like drawing on pieces. Let me see the comment.
I was just
doing
like,
wonderful.
you're good.
Okay. I'm like, let's go. Let's go. Yeah.
Outside water.
Oh yeah. So for cutting off, you're gonna want scissors, obviously. I tend to find if it's by yourself, it's easier to cut up the center or go downward. Do be careful if you're wearing any clothing underneath. If you're wearing a bra, don't cut the center connection piece because that might be bad. If you have an assistant, have them do it down the back. It tends to be a lot easier. So we're gonna do that. And it's gonna be hard to show. Sorry. So when cutting, I typically will raise the whole piece forward so I'm not cutting directly on the back. And I'm following my red guideline. Just going slowly upwards. I can already tell you're sweaty from this.
Oh, my bad.
No, that's all good.
I don't feel that bad, honestly.
That's good. It means I didn't fully kill you yet. And if you wrapped a few times with the saran wrap, you want to make sure that your scissors are going through all of the layers and not just the top one, because when you pull it apart, you might only be cutting one versus the other. So now that we have it loose, sometimes, which we can, slide it off. If it is fully to your neck or fully underneath the armpits, you may have to cut this top line right here to get the model out. And then from this point, you may sit down now. Thank you. Thank you. Give her a round of applause. So at this point, we have this little doohickey, and it's a pretty good representation of what your pattern is going to be. So from this point, I like to clean it up, and we're going to, now that we have our black drawn lines, we're going to cut to there, as well as we're going to finish cutting down all of our red lines. So I will do that real quick. We're going to do it this way. Okay. So cutting down our center seam. If you did happen to cover the second half of your body, you can save that if you want to use that as the current pattern as well, or save it for your next pattern, because then you don't have to wrap yourself again. And then we're going to put that over there. We already have our back cut, so the next part I like to do is our bottom black line. Okay, so now we have the bottom section, then we're going to do our top section. I will say if you are wrapping yourself and you do have a neck, be very careful not to constrict yourself too much. I typically make it a lot looser, and then afterwards when I have the pattern, I'll do it in fabric and adjust it from there, just because neck parts are very difficult and you don't want to choke yourself. So we're cutting our black line at this part, and not the red. Ugh, almost got that one. And now we have our arm part. So for this one, because I did draw the black line a little bit inward, we're going to cut that one rather than the red. Okay.
Maybe.
Got connected onto something else. You didn't see anything, I didn't do anything wrong. So there's that piece pattern. The last part is our little heart cutout, and we'll just do that. And that should pretty much be our pattern. Now, what I like to do, but you don't have to, is I look at the inside and you can see where I have tons of layers of saran wrap and it's not necessarily fully connected. And it might just be my OCD, but I like to cut that extra saran wrap out. It also will help when we lay the pattern out flat later. So I'm just gonna kind of trim a little. A lot of times the saran wrap will just peel off too if you like connect it in certain spots. Up there. And there's still a little bit left, but that's pretty good for now. So I'm gonna have my lovely assistant come back to the front, please.
Whoops. I guess I got too early.
Oh, that's okay. She got excited.
I did.
Yeah. Okay, so now, hand please.
Excuse you?
We are going to put it back on so you can kind of see what it would look like on our model. At this point, you can also draw more patterns or more designs on it if you would like. You can also see where it kind of sits on you. Be advised that if you are doing this for EVA foam, I do add a little bit extra foam length to the top and the side sections, and that way you just have a little bit more movability. Things to consider with doing a breastplate as well is how are you going to get in and out of it? Is it going to be one piece where this piece and that piece are the same, and then are you going to have it as a corset lace up in the back? Or are you going to have it where it's a tab on the top and on the sides? So things to think about beforehand, so that way you know how much more extra foam or material you're going to want to add to those sections. Okay, and then you may take it off. You may sit back down, and I think I don't need you to come up again. So, how are we gonna make this where it lays down flat? Well, first off, let's label each section so we know when it's all apart, which piece goes to which. So we did her left side?
Yes.
Yes. So I like to do on the left side, LF, left front. But you can mark it however you want. You can fully write it out. And then we're going to do LB, left back. As well as if you need to do any alignment areas. So like if you're going to have these two pieces come together, a lot of times you want to do just little dashes across the line so you know where they're going to align, as well as to our top. And that should be pretty good for that part. I will also put, since this is our breast area, it's most likely not going to be attached to this section. As you see, there is curvature, so we will want those to be two separate sections. So we're gonna do a lower part. So at this point, then I'm gonna start cutting them. So we'll cut the top. So now you have the two sections, and then the side. So this should be your back piece. We're gonna put that to the side temporarily. And then we're gonna cut the under breast area. Oh, and you may wanna do for this part your guidelines as well. All right, so at this point we have 3 separate pieces. So underbreast, breast cup, and the back piece. Now, depending on how curvy you are, might depend on how well the pieces will lay out flat. So the lower part underneath the breast, we're gonna put onto the table. It pretty much lays perfectly flat. So we don't need to do anything with it besides mirror the pattern later on so you have it on both sides. For our back piece, most backs you tend to not have perfectly straight up and down. You do tend to have a slight bit of a curve, and you may be able to get away, if you put this on the table, to have it lay flat, but you might also need that extra room. So for this piece, we are going to end up cutting straight down just ever so slightly. You want your patterns to lay as flat as possible on the table. So that way it's as easy as possible for you to put it into foam, Worbla, or fabric. And you can also draw a line, but I just typically cut this with scissors, and it's really easy doing it that way. So we're just gonna slightly cut down, and then we're going to see if it lays flat on the table. And it pretty much lays flat there. If it didn't, I can always go back and cut it a little bit more. It does have a little bit of room here, so I could potentially cut it there. For EVA foam, if you do want it to fit more to your body, you'll probably want to cut the piece a little bit more, so that way it'll fit more accurately. So now for our last piece is the breast area. Now, depending on how big your cup size is, you may want to do this in more sections. So typically with breast areas, you'll want, I'm gonna do this in red just so y'all can see it easier. But a lot of times it is easier for larger cup sizes to have your first cut slightly over as a straight line. And that's gonna make it the easiest to lay out flat. And then for your next pieces, a lot of times you only need one line going upward, but you may have to do separate ones. It just depends on your cup size. If you are very large, congratulations. You may have to do even more pieces just so that way you can fully cover yourself. So, and because we did add an extra piece, I'm going to say this is LF bottom cup. And then we're gonna just add our little score lines. And this will make it really easy for you to also transfer these score lines onto your foam so you can align, especially if you are more of a beginner in that material. So, pretty much that. And then we'll see if it'll lay flat from there. So we're going to cut that bottom section out. And it could probably go, I could have probably made it a little bit lower, but it'll work for what we need. So that's our bottom section, and we still have a slight bit of a curve, so we're going to want to cut that piece as well. Ah, caught the saran wrap again. All right, let's see if it lays flat. Yeah, pretty much. So for us just doing that real quickly, we've already made one side of a breastplate for a pattern. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 pieces for our pattern that we can put onto any material that we want. At this point, what I will typically do, because they don't always lay perfectly flat, I like to transfer them over to paper because paper is flat for the most part, and then you can draw your actual final lines. Since we just kind of hand drew the curvatures around, you can go and finalize that nice curve. If you wanted that cut to be straight, you can use a ruler at this point instead of trying to use a ruler and make a straight line on yourself. It tends to work a lot better when it's on paper. And then transfer all of your labels onto the piece of paper as well as all of your score marks. And then if you want to finalize a design, I recommend taking a picture with all the pieces laid out flat with your phone. Have a ruler in that picture. So that way afterwards, you know how to scale it onto your computer. And what I will do is I'll typically put it into Photoshop, and that way I can do a 1 by 1 inch box, and I can use that image of that ruler and scale my picture to 1 inch with that ruler to that box, and that'll give you the exact scale that you need. Do be aware that cameras tend to distort sometimes the image. When taking pictures, try not to have your phone like this if you're taking a picture downward. Try to have it as flat as possible. If you have a Cricut machine that has the Cricut sticky mat, those are perfect for putting your patterns on to make sure that they don't like bend or anything. It's a little trick, and it also has a built-in ruler in your picture for scaling. And then from that point, I will typically, when it's in Adobe Photoshop, I'll draw in my finalized lines. If you want, again, them to be nice and pretty, you can do it on that point, which is, I think, what you were asking about earlier.
Yes.
So, yeah. Now we have time for questions. You can, but I would recommend for doing this, if you're cutting it out of EVA foam or fabric, cut your part out first, then put it on your Cricut sticky pad, and then you can program with the Cricut machine software or whatever where you want it to cut, and it will work perfectly fine. Typically for like this front section, I won't do any. I only add, for me, I'm a little bit smaller, so I don't need as much. For seam allowance, I'll typically only do it for the connecting parts on the side and on the top. Most of the time for this piece, I'm gonna mirror it. And if it's already flat, instead of having this as two different cutouts, you can already have it for the most part, just one piece of film. So you don't have to worry about having a seam allowance in the center if it's one piece. Depending on the connection pieces, this one I made a few years ago and I was a little bit smaller, so it sits a little small now. That's my tab for the front, and then I use Velcro to connect the pieces. And then for the sides, it's supposed to be a leather detail, so I just have Velcro to connect, and makes it easier to get in and out of rather than a corset lace. If you're going to use Velcro for any of your attachments, I highly recommend getting the non-adhesive Velcro, because the adhesive does not work for attaching to surfaces for strong connections, especially on foam. And then when using adhesive that I recommend is contact cement glue, and that's where you apply it on both surfaces, so on the back of your Velcro and onto the spot that you want on the foam. Let them both dry and then connect them together for your best results. You can also use hot glue, but it does not have as strong of a hold and is more likely over time, especially with foam, to come apart. But for a quick fix, it's really good too. At this point, you don't need CAD work at all for this. Like, you don't need anything, like no Cricut, you don't need Photoshop. It's just if you want to have a more crisp line work. So, I mean, you technically don't even have to put this on paper. You can just put this directly onto your foam and trace it. And that's it. And then just cut it out with an X-Acto knife onto your EVA foam. But I recommend putting this at least onto paper so that way you can finalize and have clean lines. So for breastplates, so like this one, this is 4mm EVA foam. All of these pieces, if you see there's little decorative kind of spots, most of that is 2mm EVA foam.
That's foam?
It's all EVA foam. That's foam. The hammer is foam for the most part, and
That's
really lightweight.
I thought that was molded plastic.
No, just foam.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you
Contact cement glue. And I recommend for that to heat treat your foam before using contact cement glue. Heat treating is with a heat gun, not a blow dryer, and this is going to make it so your foam is less porous, because foam in general is very porous. It's got kind of more bubbly, and you want a more solid flat edge for the glue to adhere to, so you have more surface area for your foam to attach, and that gives you the best results with the contact cement. Yep. Yeah, I find that method's always best rather than having one in the back. For me, getting in and out of this on my own, I'll just Velcro this side, and then I can slide it over an arm and do the opposite side. And you don't necessarily have to have a handler, even though a handler is very wonderful to have. So thank you guys so much for coming to my panel. I do have business cards at the front. If you would like to see all of the pieces that we cut out, laid out flat, you can come up here as well. And I'll be at my booth after this for autographs or for if you want to ask more questions, as well as I'll be doing judging the cosplay contest tonight. And I have an EVA foam horn building workshop tomorrow, which you get a full kit on making your basic beginner EVA foam horns if you are interested in that. So There you go. Thanks, guys.